Today's podcast is brought to you by Rocket IT. Experiencing malware, data loss, or a recurring technical glitch? Your technology should be seamless to your team. Visit rocketit.com/roadmap help or click the link in this video's description to see how you can benefit from one of our personalized roadmaps.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Matt Hyatt, and this is show number 22 of the Rocket IT Business Podcast. Today, we're talking with my friend and fellow entrepreneur, Brandon Hutchins. Before we dive in, let me tell you a few things I like about Brandon. First and foremost, Brandon has a big heart for people around him, and I think that shows in everything he does. He's an employee turned business owner, and he's been an amazing steward of the organizations he leads. And yes, that's right, organizations, plural. As if one business weren't enough to keep him busy, Brandon is involved in multiple businesses at the same time. Brandon is also a very hands-on coach for the leadership team at work. He leads a men's group through his church and actively supports and mentors other entrepreneurs, all while raising a family with his wife, Nancy. Brandon, welcome to the show.
It's great being here. Thanks, Matt.
And I'm so glad to sit down with you. We had a little chat beforehand, catching up a little bit, but I always enjoy spending time with you. Brandon, you live on the other side of town, so we don't get to see each other in person too often, but glad for technology like Zoom, let us get together and hang out a little bit.
Way on the other side of the world in Marietta, Georgia.
That's right. Well, you know, it's probably not very many miles, but as we all know, traffic is horrendous around here, even during the pandemic. And so,
yeah, COVID has helped, but it's still not just a hop, skip, and a jump.
So I want to kind of start off in the Wayback Machine here a little bit. I know you graduated from Georgia Tech, which means you're super sharp. I know that, and engineering background. Right out of school, you landed a job with a little tiny company called Ernst & Young. I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about that. How did that happen? Was that your aim? And was it what you expected when you got in there?
Yeah, I thought through that period of time a lot. I have a senior in high school. I have one in college and one is a senior in high school and two that are younger, but we've been talking about college and we've been talking about career and all that kind of stuff. And to be honest, man, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I liked math. I liked the technical side of things. And I was thinking about sports to a certain degree. And anyway, I ended up going to tech and without that vision for what I wanted to do with my life. Mm-hmm. And I kind of looked around. I was very driven. The joke that I kind of have is I kind of looked around and said, well, the Coke building is kind of one of the biggest buildings. I sure would like to be the CEO of Coke one day. So
there you go.
It's like,
there's still a chance.
Yeah, there's still a chance. But, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and consulting really felt like a great avenue for me. It's like, I'm going to be exposed to businesses. Hopefully I can add some value to them along the way. And, it was a really good fit for me. It was great because there were just a ton of sharp people. I loved the way they structured their business and got to travel a lot, which at the time was kind of cool. Don't know if I'd love that today, but back then it was nice and just made a ton of friends. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed at Ernst & Young, they did a good job of showing you how to do well. They defined success for you, so it was like, hey, if you want to win here are the bullets, and my personality is like, give me a checklist or a bullet list. And I'm like, yeah, so if I want to do well, that's what I have to do to either, get good ratings or get promoted to the next level. And I appreciated that. And they did that while connecting the culture piece of the equation. So I think that was the first time my eyes were open to what a good culture looked like. And I really enjoyed just being with the people and meeting tons of friends that really I kept in touch with, even some to this day. So
wow. How long did you end up being there?
I was only there for 2.5 years, and it probably felt like 10.
Oh, really?
We, as fun as it was, we worked a lot. That was, that's kind of, somewhat of the tradition as the younger folks in the organization. We worked a lot, and but I enjoyed it. I think when you're doing something that you're enjoying, the time seems to fly.
Right.
And so I piled in the hours in that period of time.
So you mentioned something that I think a lot of young people face is, before we know it, we're legally an adult. Before we know it, we've 20, 22 years, 25 years old, and not everyone's sort of figured out what they want to do yet. I think college can be a great place to figure that out. But I am curious, your degree at Georgia Tech, did that kind of line up with what you were doing at Ernst & Young?
So as an IE, it's kind of, it's definitely not open-ended, but I think what I ended up doing in consulting was not traditional industrial engineering work. I think traditional industrial engineering work would be more like maybe being a production manager or an assembly line manager at a distribution center, maybe even air traffic control, things that deal with scheduling and time and efficiency and process. That's really a lot of what IEs do. But I think that's one of the reasons why Ernst & Young and really at the time, the big six consulting firms really liked IEs, because there was kind of a people dynamic and a process. And those were kind of the big buzzwords at the time: people, process, and technology. And so, at Tech, you had the technology and the IE process. And, I think they were looking for people that could relate with other people too. So
right,
it seemed to be a good fit.
Yeah. So what was the transition from there to Gaskins? Am I missing anything in the middle, or was it, hey, I'm leaving Ernst & Young, I'm going to work for Gaskins?
It was tough. I probably, here's a little.
Because Gaskins was a small business when you joined, right?
Yeah.
So you probably came from this very rigid, structured environment to something less than that.
So quick backstory, because I feel like it's important. So Gaskins was founded by my stepdad, Johnny Gaskins. And so when I was growing up, Johnny, it was very important for me to work. Even though I played a bunch of sports and was really involved in school and church, he was like, when you're not playing a sport, you're going to work. And so every summer and winter, I was working on a field crew at Gaskins. And so, to be honest, I hated it. I hated it. I just, especially in the summertime with the bees and the sweat, and I knew early on that it would be better for me to use my brain than my brawn in my work. And I have tons of respect for folks that do, have a trade and really work with their hand. That's just wasn't going to be my best for sure.
Right.
So anyway, in my mind, when I thought of career for me, I felt like Gaskins was the least place in the whole world that I wanted to go work. And really the only reason that
What a cruel twist of fate.
Yeah. I guess it's part of my life, and maybe this is, just part of my story. My faith has been, it's the most important thing to me. And it's really the reason why I came to Gaskins. I really felt like both my wife, Nancy, we both just felt led that I needed to talk to Johnny about potentially coming to Gaskins. And I did not want to do it, but I felt like that's what I was supposed to do. And I'll save some of the details of kind of what actually happened, but Johnny actually was offered to sell the business in '99. And ultimately he decided not to, and he wanted to grow the business. And so he was like, why don't you come on board and help us grow the business? And he was a funny guy. He was like, he was a very shoot from the hip type of a person and highly relational. And Matt, you know me, I'm a very structured, linear thinker type of a person. So we're pretty opposite. And his offer to me started with, Brandon, I don't even know what you do really at Ernst & Young, but I just want you to come over here and just do to Gaskins what you do to all these other companies. And, as someone who needs clear expectation and needs clear direction, that was the direction that I got.
So he didn't give you the bulleted list?
Yeah. I said, can you define my job a little more than that? And he was just like, no, you'll figure it out. Wow. And so as someone who, whenever I do not have structure around me, I'm usually one to try to immediately create structure. So I would always bring my job responsibilities to Johnny and say, hey, is this okay if I do this? And he's like, I don't care. Yes. Yes, do it.
So you're a pretty humble guy, but was this a rescue situation of, hey, Brandon needs to come in and turn things around? Or was it really just, you know what, I've got a plan now and it's to the moon, baby, and I want you to come help me?
It wasn't a rescue because, Johnny was doing just fine. And the business was a nice business. They had 40 to 50 people at that time. He started in 75. So that was about 25 years. It was a 25-year-old business. Mm-hmm. And they were doing fine, but there were things that I had been exposed to when I was working there through time that I knew needed to change, that he wanted to change. I think he just wanted it to be better. Mm-hmm. And he knew that the business at the time really focused on him. Like all roads came back to Johnny. And he was kind of in an unhealthy place personally. And so I think he needed help taking the business to the next level.
Yeah.
Or as we used to say, going from an entrepreneurial type of a business to a professional organization. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. We did a lot of that working together, but back to your last question, man, it was like oil and water. I mean, it was really hard because the environments were just completely different.
Right.
For sure.
Right. Well, I know a lot of businesses, dare I say, most businesses do hit certain plateaus. And certainly for a small organization, one of the plateaus is, okay, everything's tied to the entrepreneur, and how do you disconnect from that? And how do you develop a leadership team that has not just responsibility, but authority to make decisions and things like that? And then, of course, there are the processes. I can't imagine probably a more stark difference between an organization like Ernst & Young and pretty much any small business.
Right.
In terms of structure, it's going to be night and day, I would think. So I'm curious, what was your approach and what happened? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about, hey, you come on in 1999 and 2 years later, everything's humming? Is that how it kind of worked? Or was there more to it?
Well,
and by the way, when you joined, was the plan, I'm going to own this business someday?
No. My plan, well, that might have been part of Johnny's plan, but that was not part of my plan. I really thought I'm going to get in and get out. I'm going to get in and I'm going to change a bunch of stuff and I'm going to get back to the dream that I had,
How's that working for you?
And here I am 21 years later after that. But, but it really hurt me. The way I approached what I did, the results were good. We experienced a lot of growth. We went from like 3.45 million to 4.88 million the first year.
Wow.
And we went.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
We went from I remember we had 56 employees to like 47. So we went down in employees and up in revenue.
That helps the bottom line usually.
Yeah, Johnny was very happy. That was a good. He was happy, but I tell you, I think I pressed a lot of buttons and pulled levers in the right ways for the business, what the business needed. But it was personally very difficult for me because I don't, at that time in my career, I would just say I didn't see people well. It was just more like moving chess pieces on the board, implementing strategy, and really forcing my agenda more than really doing things with care. And, I kind of viewed my job a little bit as Johnny's Lynchman,
Really?
It's like all the things that he kind of secretly wanted to do. Basically, I was like, well, I'm going to go do them immediately. And I don't even care what the repercussions are because they need to happen. And as you can imagine, I wasn't the most popular person in the room.
Right.
And if I would have known that I would be here 21 years later, I probably would have gone about things a little bit differently. But I think I would do things differently anyway, kind of knowing what I know now and really the change that has occurred in my life as a leader.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. I mean, just saying, the word lynchman and not taking people into account so much is sort of the polar opposite of the Brandon Hutchins I know. So I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of how that version of you has developed and gotten there. So I know from talking with you in the past and from my show notes here that you spent about 6 years as employee. And what happened during that time that sort of changed your mindset? You know what? I really want to own this. I want to run it and I want to own it. How did that occur?
Well, the running it was a different path than the owning it path for sure.
Really?
Yeah. The running it part, I think over time, as I began to change as a leader, I really began to see, honestly, as I began to change personally, as it relates to people and the way I saw people and the way I wanted to care for people, it was interesting how I began to enjoy my job a whole lot more and develop relationships, friendships, clients, employees. And it kind of, it really turned from the thing that I least wanted to do in my whole life to something that I was so grateful for. And I have just a tremendous amount of gratitude for the opportunities that I've had along the way. I guess when I became CEO, I was like 31 or 32.
Really?
So I was
wow. Pretty young guy still. Yeah. And was Johnny still there at that point?
Yeah, Johnny was there. And he, I feel so bad about the way I've just learned so many things about being the number one versus being the number two. And probably as being the number two, I think you just have a propensity to look at number one and think of all the things that they should be doing better or why they're not perfect and why the attributes that you have are better than the attributes that number one has. You begin to inflate your own virtue and deflate the virtue of the person above you. I think you can do that not just on a 1-2, but anytime you look at a supervisor and you feel like you should be promoted. And, I just feel like Johnny was so gracious with me. He was so patient and gracious. I was so driven and I wanted more. And he just gave me enough rope to do what I needed to do, but also enough accountability to kind of keep me in check. And, I think he just knew it was time. When he began to see me start really loving people, I think was when he really started to consider, hey, I think Brandon can lead this organization and it's time. And the real I know this is something that you want to talk about at some point, but there was a person, Jeremy Kubicek, was a real influencer in our transition of the business. And
so Jeremy's been a guest on our podcast before, and many of our listeners are familiar with Giant. So good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I met Jeremy in 2003 at a conference, and we hit it off immediately. And we circled back about a year later, and then we started working together. He started working with me and with Johnny and our leadership team, and helped really Johnny to begin to transition the business. And there was really one day we were in the conference room, and Jeremy did this exercise, and he said, I want y'all each to take 15 minutes and write down on a piece of paper, what do you actually want to do? And what do you think you're good at? And we both wrote down the pieces of paper, slid it over to Jeremy, and he's like, I'm just going to read these out loud. And he's like, Johnny, you don't even want to be the CEO. And you don't even think Brandon would be, it's like all these things. It's like, why don't we just let Brandon be the CEO? And
wow.
And
I didn't know that. That was Jeremy's idea, basically.
Well, yeah, it's like, I
guess it was Johnny's idea, but he's the one that brought it out of you.
Well, on the two pieces of paper, it was so clear that Johnny wanted to be in more of a founder type role and more of a mentor type role on the technical stuff. And he was like, I don't want to run the business. And Brandon, this is what he wants to do. And he's good at it, And it was like this epiphany. And literally, I think maybe the date was late February of 2006. We had a town hall meeting March the 3rd, and he was like, okay, you're going to be the CEO. We're going to announce it today.
Whoa.
And I was like, what? Hold on. Like, I don't know about that. And actually, it was very emotional. I keep this behind my desk, but Johnny, he had this hammer that his dad gave him. And
wow.
He said, I don't have this anything too special, but I just want you to see this as a symbol of me passing the gavel to you.
Nice.
And so I keep it here behind my desk.
Love it. It's held up pretty well.
Yeah. There's a lot of backstory, and I won't bore you with a lot of backstory from 2006 to 10, but essentially he was diagnosed with ALS in 2007. The recession, we started to feel the effects of the recession in late 2007. And golly, if you want to hear more, I'll tell you more. But through that period of time, it was pretty dicey. And as we talked about ownership, as he was getting more sick, it was something that I was very interested in. But I wasn't, I wasn't really sure about our future as a company or my future and my role and what was I going to do with the rest of my life. And so I was really hesitant about going the ownership route. But
well, especially
anyway.
I would imagine, in the really, I guess we would call this the construction industry. Once you started to see it, I don't think there were a lot of people diving in and saying, I want a piece of this action. But
it was scary. And actually, Jeremy, once again, was an influencer in that decision. And, it was 2010 and we were talking, and I was like, well, maybe Giant, and we can talk about that later, but is there going to be a path of recovery for Gaskins?
Right.
And Jeremy, he said to me, he's like, you're too committed. You're like, you will not leave this thing in a lurch. I know you too well.
Yeah.
He said, if, stop thinking that you might just do something different, because you won't. You're going to see this thing through. So you might as well buy it, own it, for your efforts if it does work out. And And so that was really the push that I needed. And I ended up buying half of the business, which I could have never afforded, years before. But we were hurt very badly in the recession, big time.
Right. So you ended up buying the business in 2010. By that time, you've been in there 10, 11 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What a cool story. I think that there are lots of folks out there that sort of dream of being an entrepreneur someday and struggle to figure out how to make it happen. And, there are extenuating circumstances here. There are fortuitous circumstances here, Johnny owning the business and, being your stepdad. But you made it happen, and you made it happen amidst a crisis, really, in the industry. And it seems like it's working out okay. Seems like it's going to work out fine.
Well, multiple people, in the last 5 years are like, of course you would have. And I'm like, well, I tell you, it was probably the riskiest move I'd ever made in my life.
Right. And you're not a big risk taker, are you?
Yeah. You know me well enough to know that I'm pretty safe. I'm in the safe zone. And it was definitely the most money I'd ever, when going into debt, it was in hindsight, it was like, yeah, it's the greatest decision, from a business standpoint that I had made. But at the time, it was tough.
Yeah. So tell me, what does Gaskins look like today? What's sort of the primary focus, and how big is it? Where do you do work? Tell us a little bit about that. And then I think we're going to move on from there.
Okay. Gaskins is a surveying and engineering company in Marietta, Georgia. We do have 4 offices. We serve most of Georgia and some of surrounding states. Mm-hmm. And so when I say civil engineering, really, I'm talking about like civil site work. So we might design residential neighborhoods or commercial, retail, that kind of stuff. We do a lot of different surveying and for public, private, municipal industries. So I'll just give you this stat. So we had gotten down to 18 employees. Wow. And we're probably about $1.5 million in revenue in the recession. At that point, of our top 20 customers that we had at the time, 18 of those 20 either went out of business or stopped doing work altogether.
That is amazing.
And so what our industry looked like before the recession looked completely different growing out of the recession. And so, now we have about 100 people, 4 offices. We're in Lawrenceville, we're in Noonan, and we're in Canton. And 2 of those happened through acquisition, and 1 was more of an organic growth situation. But
that is awesome. So we may come back and touch on that topic just a little bit, because there's, we could do a whole podcast on just, how to grow an organization, how to scale, and how to do it well. And there's lots to unpack in there potentially of, for example, how do you develop a leadership team to do that well? How do you have a geographically dispersed team? That's not, you've got 4 times the overhead that I do with my one location over here. And so how do you do that? There's a lot that we get into there, but there's a lot of other things I want to cover too. And I'd like to kind of go back to the Giant part, because that's how you and I met, right? We were both active and helping with what Jeremy was doing in Giant. So tell us a little bit about that. At some point you transitioned from being a customer of Giant to really rolling up your sleeves and becoming part of Giant. Tell us about how that happened.
Well, I'll just say that I was so impacted by Jeremy and my time kind of in those early years, that as Giant Impact came about, I was a part of buying into that and kind of the whole leadership company that was created there. And I think my exposure to the content with Jeremy and the content through Giant Impact, and then ultimately when he came together with Steve Cockram, it was kind of embedded in me,
Mm-hmm.
and it had created so much change in the way I thought about things and my life and my purpose. It was just like, why would I've got to give away what's been given to me. And so it really wasn't even a question of would I be involved in Giant Worldwide. It's just like, how much can I that reasonably makes sense? And so you and I, in those early days when Giant Worldwide was formed, driving to, I think, Jacksonville. Is that what we drove to?
Yeah,
Jacksonville,
I think so. Jacksonville or Gainesville. Yep.
Getting our Myers-Briggs training, kind of getting ready, which was awesome. I mean, I loved just kind of like more tools in the tool belt on growing myself and also people around me in my business and to help others. So that was a fun little journey.
It was. So Giant Worldwide, yeah, you and I kind of came up together through that. And one of the cool things about Giant Worldwide is they've done a great job, I think, of taking leadership principles and concepts and turning them into a vocabulary and really simple illustrations or tools so that they're memorable and easy to deploy and use in an organization. There you go. Exactly. There's the toolkit right there. I know that I have some of my favorite tools out of that toolkit. I'm curious, what are some of your favorites? What are the ones that are go-to for you?
Well, probably some of the more foundational ones are the ones that I use all the time. And it's hard to just name them and not describe them. But there's one about knowing yourself to lead yourself. You know, and that I just feel like that's so applicable. There's one called the influence model where it was really a part of Jeremy and I's time together in the early 2000s when he developed it and I kind of was tweaking it and living it and implementing it. And so naturally that tool, you know, could probably make me cry if I think about all the impact that it's had in my life and in others. But, you know, I use that in hiring, recruiting and hiring.
Really?
Building
Can you give
trust.
us a quick overview of what the influence model is?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, the influence model is a tool that's used to help almost give a linear path on how to have influence with another person, how to build influence with another person, how to go beyond transactional relationship to basically a meaningful, in-depth relationship with somebody else. Or if there is a relationship in your life and you don't have the level of influence that you think you should have or would like to have, it's kind of a diagnosis tool that I'm like, why do I not have relationship? And it can help you with that. So the 4 concepts that I use the most for hiring and recruiting are building trust. Basically, you've got to check 4 boxes: character, chemistry, competence, and credibility. So when we're looking at folks, we're trying to check those boxes, and we use that language to communicate with each other. Like, man, this is a really smart candidate. We know that they know their stuff, but they can't really translate it in a way that connects to what we need in our business, which is a credibility issue, right? Or, man, they're really smart, but there was just no connection whatsoever. It seemed like they only cared about winning, or it was all about money to them. And so that's more of a chemistry character issue. So we use that pretty frequently in our language.
Yeah. I think those are great concepts to be thinking about, because I know from experience, and I bet you do too, when you decide that you need to hire another person and add them to the team, usually it's, well, I need them now. right? We try to plan for those things, and we'll probably get better at it over time. But oftentimes when you're trying to grow a business, I need that person 3 weeks ago. Or I've opened a position and it takes 3 months to fill it. By the time that it actually gets filled, wow, we're really kind of hurting for this position. So often there's a lot of pressure to pick the first human that walks through the door that knows the stuff, knows
And
the
man,
things.
it's hard to say no. It's hard to say no when you have a need, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I like the idea of intentionally going through those 4 check boxes, as you call them, just to make sure that it's right. Because we all know that, well, I think we do. Maybe we don't all know, but you and I know that as painful as it is to be without someone in a position, it's way worse to go ahead and get the wrong person in the position and then just deal with that.
Absolutely.
It just takes a lot. So I like the intentionality. So I want to talk a little bit about that acquisition piece that you were discussing. This is something that I certainly haven't mastered. I think some of our listeners probably would be interested to hear. How does that work? First of all, how do you find an acquisition target? How do you decide whether or not it's a good move for your business and the other person? And is your approach typically to bring the entrepreneur along with that acquisition, or are you really looking for an asset type purchase? Can you tell us a little bit about how you go about that?
Well, I wish there was like a one path and a clear path for each of the acquisitions that I've done. And I've done more than just for the new locations. I think the consistent thing in all the acquisitions have all been about just trying to find great people.
Okay.
And
so it's more about the talent rather
Yeah.
than necessarily the customer base.
Right. Which
Yeah.
in my business, we're a service-based business. And so you're really only as good as your people, because our people they're the ones doing all the interfacing with the clients and producing the product and with the counties and municipalities. And so so anyway, it has been a good mechanism to draw in great talent. And sometimes it's been very intentional to try to go into another location, as we've strategically said, hey, we want to be in Lawrenceville.
Right.
But the Lawrenceville was probably more of an organic growth situation. So I have been intentional to look for opportunities. The best connections have always been through just word of mouth and people just making people connections. And then after that, it just starts with just getting to know people. For me, this is my way is the character chemistry piece is, when it comes to an acquisition, character chemistry leads by eons.
Right.
It's like, it is a big deal for a person who owns a business to give up ownership of their business.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that is a big deal. It's a big deal to have it and to carry the weight of responsibility. So I know when I'm talking to somebody who has been carrying that weight, I just try to sit in their shoes and say, is my situation better than their current situation? And
Right.
How can I make it better? The perfect fit, and so this is part of knowing myself, is I really love business. I enjoy the business part, the complexities, the just the internal guts of a business. And a lot of people in my industry who have small firms, they're kind of the maybe more entrepreneurial. And so they don't really love the business part. They just kind of accidentally got into that part,
Right.
They were just great at what they did, good at the profession, but they've kind of hit a wall and can't get to the next level. And so For me, I've kind of identified. So, more generally, it's say identify who are you and what do you want, and from an acquisition standpoint, who is the best candidate for you to merge with. And for me, it's merging with that entrepreneurial type person that needs help with their business.
Right.
And I want people who are just great with serving others and doing a great job with their trade, whether it be engineering or surveying.
I kind of feel like it just leans back a little bit on the influence model deal, because my experience has been that few entrepreneurs are willing to offer up, hey, you know what? I'm really in over my head here, and
Right.
I'm really struggling and I need help. Can you help me? Not many people are willing to do that, really.
Which is the
all.
whole piece of self-preservation, right?
Right.
The influence model is, will people be willing to admit that they're holding on to things that really are outside of their strength zone?
Right.
And do they want to change? Do they want to be healthier and happier in their business situation?
Yeah, I love it. Well, I think you must be quite good at it. Four is a pretty good number. You're shaking your head.
I mean, I'd say mostly I pray about it, and I can't tell you. This is probably important to know. I've had so many conversations, so many. For every acquisition transaction that happens, it's maybe 5 to 10 to 1. It just,
really? Yeah.
It's, the first conversation is easy. Second conversation is easy. And then you start to get into the details. Right. And then, and then that's where the self-preservation part kicks in with a lot of folks. And a lot of times money and real estate, those are just typical roadblocks. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the person has to be willing to let go. Right. The control piece is the number one piece at the end of the day. And it may make sense in every logical way, but they say, you know what? I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I just can't.
So I'm going to get a little bit personal here. Have they all gone swimmingly well, or have there been any missteps?
Well, I mean, every time you merge cultures, even if you think you're aligned, there's always going to be tension and change, right? It's really a change management exercise. It's like there's the excitement from your organization of bringing somebody else on, and then there's the acquiree that's like, everything's going to change for me, because in our experience, they've been smaller organizations blending into our bigger organization. And, I think they've all gone pretty well, because I think they've all been focused on the person. It's like, I don't want to get rid of you. I have no desire for you to be gone. I want you, not only do I not want that, I want you to be part of our family. I want you to be part of our DNA. And I do think that there's a real strong sense of belonging for each of the ones that we've done. And, I'd love to do more. They're hard to do, though, because there are always things that I just didn't think about, or I missed, or it's like, dadgummit, I forgot to think about their server capacity versus our server capacity. And
Right.
We're going to have to renovate the building, but I didn't think about the 3 months it's going to take. What are we going to do in the meantime before, just the weeds, getting into the weeds. There's always stuff,
Right.
but I feel like that's just part of business, right? It's just solving problems. It's
Right.
solving problems every day.
Well, on that topic, I would imagine that some of the biggest challenges when you're doing an acquisition of another firm is how, you're going after them in part because you want access to the talent, and you probably want to retain the customers too. And so how do you transition well and make that a good experience and sort of a good news event for the employees and customers of those acquisition targets?
The biggest thing to me is like really paying attention to the owner that's coming in. Mm-hmm. If they're happy, they're going to have a positive message that they're communicating to their clients.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, absolutely.
If they're happy, they're going to be like, hey, this is better. And let me tell you that I feel like that's part of like the dating process, mm-hmm. is identifying, are we actually better together? Do we have a story to tell? And if you can check those boxes, that when you actually do come together, it's like, well, here's the story. Like, all you got to do is tell the story, because it really is better,
Right.
It's not, we haven't done acquisitions where it's paid tons of money and the owner runs off in the sunset. It's a different structure. And so there needs to be a great story on why we're better together.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
So that we can tell that story, and it's a true story. You're just speaking from your heart, and people can see authenticity, right?
Right. So tell me a little bit about how you view your role in the organization today. Obviously you're wearing the CEO hat, you're leading the organization, but you've got a dispersed workforce at this point. I got to think there are some folks on your extended team that don't get to see a lot of FaceTime with Brandon Hutchins. But yeah. What's your approach? And I also hear, and I think probably our listeners hear, that there's a strong faith element here too. And I'd kind of like to hear how you interweave those two facets of your life.
Yeah. Well, in terms of my role, I can tell you, I'm in a phase right now where I need help. I need operational help,
right,
in the business. I think the last two growth areas for us, Lawrenceville and Noonan, I think I underestimated just the geography and how it was harder for me to have a presence,
Sure.
And so it was kind of pulling at me more. And the reason it's pulling at me is because I want to be with people. I want to be with the people. I want them to know that they are known, that they're not a number, that
right.
you and I have talked about this before, this idea of being a pastor at work is I want to know them, and I want to know, how can I support you? How can I support and challenge you in a way to help you to get to where you want to be? Like that is what I want for every person. And man, it is really challenging right now to just do that and be that. And
especially amidst the pandemic.
And and the pandemic. Just
right.
Like being with people. It's hard. I love it that Zoom is more acceptable. That's
right.
a good thing.
Right. Yeah.
And so, that's something that I probably should just be more intentional with, is just setting up more kind of face-to-face meetings through Zoom that I'm doing. But yeah, so my role, I currently just feel like I'm head down and dealing with, a lot of the problem solving and just growing the business pieces. And I don't feel like my heart wants to be more people focused and even external focused. And so I guess I'm just being vulnerable, as I know that I want and need to be more in that zone than I am today. And I'm working on, I'm trying to grow that part of the business so that I can shift my role a little bit in that capacity. And what was the second question you asked?
Well, actually, let's kind of zoom in on that, pastor at work concept, because
the faith integration. That's
well, right. So I would like to know, 100 something employees. While I actually don't know, but I have not noticed on your website, we're a faith-based organization at Gaskins.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would imagine that with 100-something employees, not everyone, when they apply for a job at Gaskins, is saying, hey, really hope my CEO is sort of a pastor-minded person that's going to invest in me personally. So how do you tell me about how that works at Gaskins and sort of what your approach is and what do you hope to achieve with that approach?
Right. Well, I wouldn't say that we are overtly, I don't that's not something that I really care about posting on the website. I just want to live that, I just want to be that in the way I live life and do relationships, and would love for people to say, man, he seems different than maybe the normal CEO. I mean, hey, don't get me wrong. We have to be profitable. Those are the things that kind of make the things spin. But I think just trying to love people well, that's what I want my focus to be every day. And I'm not great. I'm not great at it. There's some things that we do that I'm glad we do, and I feel like we need to do so much more. We have a team that is called our giving team, and they've been out of work for a while, and they need help. And this group is I love their hearts for the way they've wanted to kind of rally around people, and so the giving team is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, it's really cool. So how do you do that, Brandon? Do you just set aside in your budget, hey, I've got X number of dollars available for the giving team, and let them have at it?
Yeah. The funny thing is, I feel like I used to do that and just kind of identify a number.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, at this point, I want to say yes to everything. I want them to have the mindset of just, hey, how can we help people? Even if it's not a ton, for each person, it's like, how can we help every person?
Wow.
And we've had a couple deaths within the company through the years, and, just be able to rally around spouses of, and do some different things. It's, I just think that's important. The other piece that you might probably want to know, I do this class. One of my favorite books. Have you read Leadership and Self-Deception?
No, I haven't.
It's a short read.
Those are my favorite.
It's an allegory book too. So I'm like the worst reader in America. So when you hear me say that I've read a book and read it multiple times,
right,
like that's actually saying something.
Right.
I don't read a ton, but anyway, this book is an allegory, and it walks through the story about how this one person is coaching a new manager to understand a philosophy of how they do business and why they do it. And I read the book and I was like, man, I love what he's doing. And it caused me to say, I need to do that. Like, wow. Whenever we have new employees at any level, we have this thing called the connections class. And we talk about what's our history, our vision, our values, expectations for every employee. I share my heart, my story, and that it's a mutual responsibility. Like I can't see my field guys every day. It's just not possible. They're, they're gone. They're out of this office most of the time. But I'm like, man, when you're even close to my office, just come say, hey,
Right.
I'm just the CEO. You have a different title, but we're both human beings, and I want to know you, and, I've got employee directories that I try to, study up on, and, it's got spouses and kids, and that's just important to me. Other people are like, that's dumb, but it's just important to me, and so weaving my faith into that's just part of my faith is how can I love people well? Well, number one, I need to know them. I need to know what's going on with them. And, I want to be able to walk with them and pray for them when they're going through the adversities of life, because they're absolutely plenty, And
Right.
the funny thing is so right now my dad is in the ER. He has COVID.
Oh, I didn't know
and
that.
he's in the ER right now. And it's just amazing just to see the number of employees that have reached out to me and just said, "Hey, I heard about your dad, praying for him."
Wow.
It's, you get emotional just thinking about that people, they really want to care, and they do care.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when they experience care on the other side. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I did not know about your dad. I hope he's recovering well.
He's getting better every day. He's getting
good.
better every day.
That's good. That's good.
Hopefully he'll go home tomorrow.
Man, that'd be great. So tell me, you've got another business, at least one more that I even know about. I think there might be more. How many businesses are you involved in right now, Brandon?
So right now?
Yeah.
A couple.
Okay.
There are several.
Yeah. So I know about Integrity. Tell us about Integrity.
Integrity is a construction management and general contracting business. And
so for our listeners, what you see behind me is Integrity's work. They did the renovation on your building. That's right. That's right.
And that it probably describes me some. I am, Matt, you know me well. I am not a very innovative person. Like I do not, I am not cutting edge with anything. But I feel like I'm always looking for that intersection of people's desires and opportunity. And if I can help make those two things come together, I love doing that. And I love business. So it's kind of like with Integrity, there was an employee who had a lot of experience with construction management, and there was a big need in our
Gaskins
industry.
Employee?
There was a Gaskins employee that there was just a need. A lot of that sector of people during the recession had really gone away. And there was a need, and I was like, well, hey, if this is part of what you want to do, then let's do it. So essentially we just started Integrity, and it has shifted a few times since that original foundation. That one guy ended up taking another business opportunity. But Matt Donald came in about 4.5 years ago, and just done a great job. And it's part of his heart's desire to be community minded. And he was the one that added the GC side of the business onto the construction management.
I see.
And, it's been great. It's, again, still challenges all the time and lots of problems to solve. But, having partners, that's another whole topic.
Sure is. Yep.
Trying to be a good partner to the other person and provide support and challenge and some mentoring and also a lot of freedom. It's, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but Matt's doing a great job. I'm proud of what he's doing at Integrity.
Yeah. I've gotten to know Matt a little bit, and definitely a good guy. And I can see how you guys get along really well, I bet.
And he's a completely different voice than me, which I think is that's a whole nother thing. But with him as a connector and me as a guardian, we're very different in our personalities. And I think what we bring to the table is very different as well.
Yeah.
And
well, that often really, we've talked about this before, I think. A lot of times people see those differences as problems. And and folks have a hard time getting along because they see the world differently. You talked about that with Johnny. I talked about that a little bit with Matt. But the reality is many times that's a real strength when you can bring those two different worldviews together for a common good. It seems like you've sort of mastered that approach?
Well, I mean, mastered is, I've definitely matured more. And I think that begins with, that was part of my giant journey as well. The first step was seeing people as people, right? Not as objects. I think that was the 2D part of my growth. And then the 3-dimensional part of my growth has been learning to value all kinds of people who are different. It's just natural to think that the way you're wired is the best way to be wired.
Right.
And so you only want to have people who are wired just like you.
Right.
And maturity comes, I feel like, when you can begin to appreciate people who are different than you and bring different things to the table. And I'm not perfect at that, but I'm trying to get better at really recognizing, man, situationally, there are tons of people who are way better than me at certain things and situations, and I'm better than them in certain situations, just depending on just your voice and your wiring and nature, nurture choices, all that kind of stuff.
I remember way back when, before I got familiar with Myers-Briggs and got kind of plugged into the giant nomenclature of the 5 voices, I was kind of a DISC guy. I liked the DISC assessment. But I just remember specifically talking with the test consultant where we bought the DISC tests. They would say, hey, you're probably going to want to have your team charted out on this DISC chart, and you want it to look like a shotgun shot. You want some D, you want some I, you want some S. You want to have everybody grouped together. And I've found that that's completely true. That when you've got a diverse business with multiple voices at play, boy, you can get a lot accomplished when you kind of bring all those strengths together. And there's some friction from time to time because somebody, acts differently or communicates differently than we do. But ultimately, that's a strength. You also see that in just relationships. We all heard opposites attract, and I can't tell you how many couples I know. And Maureen and I are a couple like this, where our personalities are very different. And that could be seen as a negative. But in reality, bring those two together and we can accomplish a lot together. That opposites attract is actually a really positive thing.
Yeah.
You and Nancy, you're basically the same person, right?
It was embarrassing because one of the first books that came out was from Giant was the 5 Voices. And I actually didn't really know Nancy's voice at the time.
Oh, okay.
And I was speculating in the book. It says, and it wasn't actually what her voice ended up being.
Oh no.
And I was like, yeah, it shows you how much I know her. Turns out she's a creative, which is kind of my nemesis voice, and it's kind of hardest for me to kind of see and navigate and know. But I think the creatives are awesome, and I look around.
Thank you, Brandon.
There's such a low percentage of creatives in the world, and yet I know and am friends with many creatives. It's mind-boggling. I don't quite understand.
We're a lovable people.
Sometimes,
Right.
man, sometimes.
Right. Well,
maybe it's my problem solving. It's just maybe I'm just trying to fix them, right?
Right. There's a lot of work to do there. There's ample opportunity. So, speaking of Nancy, you're running several businesses, several is what you said. You're active in your church. I think I counted 4 kids, and they're all over the place. College, high school, and then middle school? You don't have anybody in elementary still, right?
Elementary, yeah.
You need an elementary.
12th, 9th, 5th, and sophomore in college.
Wow. How do you balance that? I mean, that's a lot. That's just a lot. And you were even talking about, multiple locations in this business and trying to be present with 100 people. How in the world do you balance all of that? Or do you?
Well, I think in general with, multiple businesses and home life and a concept there was a couple that led our small group. This was probably in the early 2000s, and they are a very intentional couple and have lots of influence in the community. And I remember Cindy talking to me about overlapping and how important overlapping has been to the way they do all that they do. And I would say that's something that stuck with me, and I try to do that within. So my business relationships and friendships many times have a lot of overlap. And so I try to be intentional about, maybe checking boxes is the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to connect and be intentional with people, and it might influence multiple situations. And then I'd say with my kids, they're really great, and they're all different, which is hilarious. They're, if you're a parent of multiple kids, it's funny because they're not necessarily going to be just like you, and they're going to be different than you. And so all of this leadership training has helped me a lot to see my kids for who they are, like as individuals. And I try to see them individually and be with them individually. With 4 kids, they want to be known. Sure. I think that's just a desire, is I want to be known. And so I might try to take one to breakfast or take to lunch. We try to do some special trips that are just one-on-one, and we try to do some that are family too. So Nancy and I try to go on a date every week. That's one of the things early in our marriage that we just felt like was important. And we see experiences as important as well. And so we just try to be intentional. That's really, that seems like such a generic answer, but that's probably my answer, is just being intentional. There's so much wasted time. Like I waste so much time, and there's just so much wasted time that if you are intentional about the way you use your time, and I'll brag on you, Matt, your schedule, I've seen your schedule, your color-coded schedule. I love it. I mean, you're very intentional with how you use your time. And, I try to be, and I think when you are intentional, it does help you to be able to balance things. I've been working more recently, and that has to do with probably capacity and kind of what I was saying before about my role. And I really don't like that, because I really want to be more present. I want to be more present mentally and physically with my family and with my friends, and, and with people here at work, so.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot. Tell me, as you look ahead, what's next for you? What does the future look like? I think we're all sort of, okay, we're going to get through this pandemic finally. And, we're all going to go take a trip somewhere and maybe sit on a beach and have a cocktail or something like that. But beyond that, what's sort of your plan for the next several years?
So I'm 46. And so I've begun to maybe look at chunks of my life, maybe 50 is the next milestone. And, I think my latest thought is just trying not to get too far ahead of myself. And I'm excited about what we're doing at Gaskins and Integrity. And I know that Giant will always be a part of my, my heart and my life. And so, I want to do more of that as I can. And I want to be giving away what's been given to me. And so leading small groups, it really just feels like probably more of the same. But I will say in particular, I just really love business. And so our mutual friend, Chad, Merrill, who
he's been on the show also. Yeah.
I've got some connection with him and partner with him on some things. And it's been really fun to to see businesses kind of, he and I look at some different stuff together. And I feel like I'm always kind of in this state of learning, you know, when you get to see other businesses and other CEOs and the way they do things, that's a learning opportunity, right? It's like, man, you know, I need to really consider that. That's a great idea. And so the more I get exposed to more businesses, the more ideas it gives me about, you know, my own. Nice. And so,
well, that's
not a real clear plan for my future. It's probably just the more of the same. And if I was being really honest with you, Matt, I would just say, I just want to be wherever the Lord wants me to be. And I'm open to that, because I just know that when I'm trying to get my own way, I'm probably missing out on probably the best things that are in store for me. And so I'm trying not to think too much about it, even though, man, I can't wait to be empty nesting like you.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty fun. It's nice.
I want to.
You know what? It goes by super quick though, Brandon, and I know you know that, but I think people really learn. It goes, you know, where that phrase comes from. Time flies. You know, when they're parents. But you know, Maureen and I, relatively new empty nesters over the past year or so, and look back and say, gosh, you know, in some ways, in the middle of parenting, it seemed like this is our life, right? And then when you're an empty nester and the kids are off on their own and doing their own thing, it's like, wow, that was really a flash in the pan. You know, it's 20 years, basically. And if you are lucky enough to live to 80, it's only 25% of your life. It goes by very, very quickly. So yeah, I know for me, it's going to be more like 30 years because of the spread. The spreading years. We kind of knocked ours out back to back. So we go through that pretty quick. Well, that's awesome, Brandon. Good job. Let's move on to the lightning round. So this is just a few questions we try and ask every guest of the Rocket IT Business Podcast. And, you know, I'm going to be very interested to hear your answer to this. Tell us about one person who's made a profound impact on your journey.
All right. I'm going to pick two just because I've talked so much about Jeremy. Jeremy, for sure, has been a catalyst for a lot of positive change in my own life. So Jeremy has been very influential in my life. There's a guy named David Eldridge who's my pastor. And, you know, he's my best friend too. We planted a church together in 2006.
In your spare time.
And we have lunch together every Wednesday. And I would just say so it's been like 20 years. We've gone to lunch every Wednesday.
Wow.
And I would just say he has been such an encourager and just a model for me, just in living life and bouncing ideas off of and sharing burdens and problems. And, you know, it's interesting, you know, he knows more about Gaskins than anybody. Right. And he's not even in Gaskins.
Right.
And so anyway, he has been very influential just by being there, sharing time, and then just living his life with integrity and character. So
mentors are so important.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you've got two really great ones.
Yeah.
Nice.
For sure.
What's the single most important lesson you've learned in your professional career?
Easily the people that, like, seeing people as people, and then seeing them, and then learning how to value people that are different from you.
Right.
You know, probably both of those lumped together, the people part for sure. Yeah. But I'm naturally more of a competence type person, you know, naturally. Sure. So me learning that other side changed everything for my business and life.
Love it. So you said reading's maybe not your favorite thing. Are you a podcast guy? What sort of has your attention right now, and how do you learn new things?
Well, I love talking to other CEOs for sure. Like I love that's my best tutorial. And I'm bluff. I've read a lot of books. I don't listen to podcasts, but I don't.
You're missing out, man.
Yeah. I don't read a lot of new books. How about that?
Okay.
It's kind of like if they get tested and people are like, "Oh, I love this book. Hey, The Advantage is a great book." And I hear 3 people say that, then I'm like, okay, well then I'll read that book.
So you have the public vet it for you.
That's right. That's right. That's kind of the story of my life. You might be you're more cutting edge than I am. So
I don't know.
I'm going to wait. And so books like Great by Choice, Integrity, Leadership and Self-Deception, which I mentioned. There's one called The Pursuit of God that I just read. Wow, that was pretty awesome.
Fantastic. So if people want to learn more about you or Gaskins or Integrity, what's the best way for them to reach out and find more information?
Probably just email me. It's bhutchins@gscsurvey.com. Our phone number 770-424-7168. I'm probably call me on my cell, but I'll let Matt filter that and then
There you go. Nice job. All right. On that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. Brandon, for myself and our audience, thank you for joining us today. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Should you have any suggestions on future topics that you'd like to hear more about, please email us at podcasts@rocketit.com. And finally, a quick plug for Rocket IT. We help businesses leverage technology to create seamless networks that encourage productivity and profitability. To learn how a personalized roadmap can bring efficiency to your business and clarity to your team, visit rocketit.com/roadmap-help or click the link in this episode's description.